This past weekend, we learned something interesting once again about the nature of good versus evil, and I'm going to talk about Revenge of the Sith. I'm Joshua Lisec. This is Daily Persuasion. I am the New York Times bestselling author and co-author, ghostwriter of 98 nonfiction books now, and a certified hypnotist. Through this unique experience, I teach you how to better influence the VIPs of your life and your career. As I said, Revenge of the Sith, it was for the 20th anniversary of the film, back in theaters there for a week. Of course, I went to see it again for probably the 76th time now. And that film, it gave Snow White, the new Snow White film, a run for their money. Even with just 1 week of viewing, that's incredible, but not surprising. So it's not, I guess, that incredible. In any case, the message of that particular story is the deception of evil, the insidiousness of it, how it's a trap. And what we notice about the decision making of the Sith versus the decision making of the Jedi in the context of the Clone Wars storyline, the end of war against the droid armies, so on and so forth. What we notice is that the Sith are willing to do anything and everything that it takes to have and keep power, absolute power. The Jedi were not. The Jedi were conflicted. There is a line where, after the Jedi Master, the most powerful Jedi of all of them ever, as he's the only one who, in the movies, defeated Darth Sidious, he said that if Chancellor Palpatine did not relinquish power, then the Jedi would need to overthrow him and have control of the Galactic Senate, as a sort of theocracy, you might say. And then Yoda, I believe he said the line was something like, "To a dark place this line of thinking will take us." Something like that. What are they concerned about? They're concerned about optics. They're concerned about power and the wisdom of wielding it or not wielding it. If you juxtapose that with that unwillingness to get and keep power, or at least the hesitation, contrast it with the Sith, who were very willing to do anything and everything it took to get and keep full power over a foe who is not willing to do that, who's going to win that conflict every single time. Juxtapose that with a message of the Lord of the Rings trilogy. And I like to put the Star Wars prequels and the Lord of the Rings trilogy from Peter Jackson on the same cinematic, artistic excellence footing, much to the chagrin of prequel deniers. And a message of the Lord of the Rings is something to the effect of people who want power are the only ones unsuitable for it. And those who reject power are the only ones willing to wield it. So you know how Galadriel and Gandalf were both unwilling to be the ring bearers because they knew how powerful the rings would be, and they knew how it would amplify them and turn them into something rather monstrous. And you understand how the little hobbit turned into, or perhaps devolved into, the Gollum character because of the influence of the ring in his possession. And so one has to take away from that, well, power is just simply not safe for anyone to have ever because of how it will turn someone like a Sauron into the Sauron villain character. Something close to an all-powerful monstrosity. What are we getting at here, Joshua? What we're getting at here is, in theory, across pop culture and also politics, what we see is something like, in theory, power is unsafe, therefore it must be relinquished on certain cadences. This is fair to think about. I'm not going to reject that or deny that. But we also see that there's consistently only one side that is ever, and frankly, only ever willing to do whatever it takes to get and keep power, absolute power. And we see that in cinema and literature from the Sith, the Sauron, respectively. We see that from left-wing political parties, organizations, organizers, movements, uprisings. So what you'll notice on the American right, historically speaking, they have said things like, we put principles before power. Yeah, and the other side doesn't. Their principle is power. Friend-enemy distinction. If you're a Republican, you're guilty of anything we accuse you of, and if you're a Democrat, you're innocent of it. Unless you're no longer useful to us, or we can scapegoat you. Like what happened to Sam Bankman-Fried, for example. Elliot Spitzer as well, and others. Right, but the point is, if you wanted power, what would you do to get it? What would you not do? Something I like to do on this channel is do a little self-persuasion. And that means asking yourself questions you may not have asked before. You ask yourself before, and uncomfortable ones at that. And maybe one of those is, what's your price? What's your price? You might recall how a couple of months ago, with the SNAP EBT news stories that Robert F. Kennedy Jr., Director of Health and Human Services under Donald J. Trump, suggests that various state and local welfare programs not honor food stamps for carbonated sweetened soft drink purchases like Coca-Cola products, like Pepsi, and so forth. Well, there, of course, was a backlash. And it turned out that there was an influencer campaign in which soft drink manufacturing advocacy groups paid right-wing influencers as much as $1,000 to turn their account into pop propaganda. I should have said propaganda. $1,000. And when the op was exposed, there were those who completely, totally, and permanently lost their reputation, their authenticity, their trust, because they did not disclose that they were being paid to post very similar messages across their social media. And so we saw who was really a grifter. We also saw how cheap they are. That was the toughest part about this, in my opinion, was seeing who would sell their soul for $1,000. There's not a call to action in today's episode beyond thinking, you and power. What power do you want? What are you willing and not willing to do to get and keep it? And understand that your enemy is willing to do a whole lot more to get and keep it. So what do you do in that dynamic? We saw that the left was willing to escalate their rhetoric persistently, continuously, and via the numerous death threats and wishes upon Donald J. Trump and his family, they were able to successfully incite 2 assassination attempts. I mean, I wrote the book on it, okay? I wrote the book on it with Jack Posobiec on that phenomenon. We have a chapter in there, of course, which is the motive, and that is how the Democratic Party and Democrat influencers in media, culture, news, so on and so forth, put years of effort into entrancing the population so that they would be hyper suggestible to desire for open violence towards their opposition. In this case, that's Donald Trump, and that's Trump supporters. And it worked. It worked. Except they missed. The right is not, and I do not believe that the right ought to engage in similar behavior. That would be something reactionary. Oh, we should do exactly what they do. We don't believe in being reactionary. We believe in reciprocity. Very different. Very different. If you're not sure what that means, check out the book behind me, Unhumans, at unhumansbook.com. Oh, what's that? Maybe there is a call to action after all.